Welcome to Fix It Home Improvement, covering projects that every homeowner should know and great products for home and garden.
Hi, I'm JC, and this is where we share weekly home improvement tips. I'm here with my co-host, Cindy.
Hello, JC.
Hi, Cindy. Today we're going to be talking about hammers. We'd like to thank Kurt Becker for liking and sharing our podcast. So the earliest hammers were just stone connected to a wood handle. And
So how is that a hammer?
Because you're slamming stuff with it. And archaeologists say that the hammer is one of the oldest tools that they have definite evidence of. So about 30,000 BC, stones were attached to sticks and they used animal sinew to hold it to it. And what's wild is the sinew, these are the tendons that connect muscle to bone, so they would strip it off animals. They're very elastic. They're almost string-like. So they're very elastic, they're very strong. So they would tie these stones onto the end of a stick, and as it dries, it shrinks and holds it together. And there's natural glues in these tendons. So it locks it in place. So just really fascinating. And then around 75 AD in Rome, hammers that they were creating took on the modern shape that we know a hammer as. So you've got this metal head with a hole through it so a wood handle can be pushed through it. It has a striking face on one side, and then they had a claw on the other side to remove nails. And this is 75 AD.
Wow.
Crazy, huh? So the main hammer that every homeowner should have is a carpenter's hammer, and you're either going to have a curved claw or a straight claw on the opposite side of the face. So you're pounding with the face, the nails, and then when you bend them, and you're not doing a
because you're doing a bad job?
Right. You can use that claw end. So it has a V notched out of it that allows you to grab the nails, and then the curve of the head allows you to use that as a fulcrum and pull out the nails.
Why is it called a claw?
Because it looks like a wild animal's claw.
Any wild animal?
And so the curved claw is primarily for pulling nails. And this is really a nice style because it's very easy to pull a nail out. The straight claw actually is excellent for ripping out boards. So if you're doing demolition and you're trying to get in between, let's say, floorboards, or even if you're pulling apart 2x4s, you can pound that claw in between them and rip them apart. You can use a straight claw to pull nails, but it's not as easy. In fact, one trick is if you have a very thin piece of wood, you can put it underneath the head and then use that to pry against, and it's going to pull nails easier. Where a curved claw, it has such great leverage. It does a real easy
Isn't
job.
that one of the problems is people they're breaking the actual trim because they're putting too much pressure?
Yeah, and that's a good tip also. If you're doing any delicate work where you're pulling out nails, I would use a thin piece of wood. In fact, I always try to keep a couple of wood shims in my tool bag and just slide that underneath there to pull a nail.
What size would you suggest?
So I think the most comfortable for most homeowners is a 16-ounce hammer.
What does that mean?
So the head is 16 ounces. This has enough weight where you're going to be able to drive nails. So even if you're doing long, 2.5-inch nails, driving it into 2x4s, let's say, it's heavy enough to do that, but you have a lot of control. It seems like most people, if you're not using a hammer as a living or you're not really framing, doing big projects, once you get over 20 ounces, they're very difficult to handle. Most of the pros, they're using 20, 22-ounce hammers, so they're much heavier, they're longer, so you're going to get a lot of force. So they're raising this above their head, and they're coming down, and you're going to drive a nail very quickly. So it just cuts your day in half.
Oh.
If you're not pounding with these light hammers. And what's also nice about a 16-ounce hammer is you can do it for all your projects around the house. Tiny nails for hanging pictures and things like that, or trim in a tight corner. A small 16-ounce hammer just does a nice job. And that's just a good all-around size.
So if you're in the store, the majority of the hammers are going to be 16 ounce?
No, it's weird. When you see these sets in a lot of stores, they carry a lot of these 20, 22-ounce hammers that I think are just too heavy for the average person. If you have a lot of projects that you're planning on doing, you're going to be building stud walls, finish your garage or your basement. If you're building a shed, a framing hammer is nice. So a framing hammer is usually going to be 20, 22 ounce. You're going to have a long handle. So the typical handle is probably going to be about 12 inches. You get into these framing hammers, they're like 16, 17, 18 inches long.
Wow.
And you're holding it at the end, and you've got to have a ton of control And like me with my chicken muscles, I just can't control these bigger hammers. So I've always liked. Well, I've had a 16-ounce hammer was my core hammer, and I like hammers. I've got a bunch.
I know.
And I'll say I've got a 16-ounce fiberglass hammer that I've probably had for more than 20 years. And it is just, I mean, it's full of paint and tar and just beat up, and it's just beautiful.
If you like your hammer, you should take care of your hammer.
I do. I use it. The hammer likes to be used. And then, I bought a couple of these. Like I bought one of the Stanley Fat Max. Mm-hmm. So this has a beautiful hickory handle. It's got to be like an 18-inch long handle, and it's beveled, and it's 22 ounce, and it is just hard to wield for me. Mm-hmm. So I like the smaller hammers. One thing those larger framing hammers have too is they have a milled face. So this is a serrated or waffle-like pattern that helps grab onto the nails while you're pounding it. So if you're pounding a nail and you come at a slight angle, that waffle pattern will grab it rather than sliding off. So what I recommend for most homeowners is just a very smooth face with a slightly convex shape. If you're hammering nails into trim or wood projects, if it slides off, you're less likely to mar the surface.
Mm-hmm. So if you use the other one, it'll make a mark?
Yeah.
That's a drag.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the different types of handles.
So traditionally, all the handles are made out of wood, commonly hickory or ash. And hickory they've been using for hundreds of years because it's very strong. It can withstand shock without splintering or cracking. And what's wild is the American Indians figured out that you could temper the wood over a fire, and it gives it a very hard, weather-resistant finish. Wild, huh? Wood handles are generally less expensive, but they're easier to break when you're prying up nails or if you're trying to pull apart wood.
Which there are replacement handles.
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, if you like the shape or the feel of a wood handle,
right.
Don't be scared to grab it, because if you crack it, you can just replace the handle.
Have you ever done that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've replaced a lot of handles at the store.
So what do you do?
So the process with this, if you buy a replacement handle, let's say it's completely broken off. If you can't knock it out, and it's best to use a vise. Mm-hmm. If you can't knock it out, the wood out of the head itself, you're going to saw it down.
So like with another hammer?
Right, yeah. So you got to use a hammer on your hammer. And you can drill holes in it, and there's going to be a couple steel wedges that you have to be careful of, but you can drill a couple holes through the wood to give it some room to move. Mm-hmm. Pound out that old wood. You're going to slide in a new handle. With the handle, you're going to have a little kit. It's going to have a wood shim, and then there's going to be 1 or 2 steel pieces of wedge.
Right.
And so you put your handle in. There's a slit in the top of the handle that you're going to use another hammer and pound in your wood shim, and then you're going to cut that smooth with the top of the head, and then you're going to, at a 90 degree to that wood shim, you're going to pound these steel wedges. And that expands it and locks it into place.
Interesting.
Wild, huh? So
we should do a video on that.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. But now, most hammers, they're so inexpensive,
right,
that more and more people
if it's your favorite hammer of all time?
If it's been handed down from
right.
generation to generation, then you would definitely want to replace the handle. And one of the other problems with wood handles is, if you leave them out on a job site or you're working outside, they can swell and shrink when they get wet.
Right.
I usually recommend either a graphite or a fiberglass handle because it's lightweight, they're durable, you can usually get them fairly inexpensive, and they are going to stand up to pulling and prying. Like I said, I have that 16-ounce fiberglass hammer that I used forever, and I've beat it. I've slipped off the nails and slammed that wood into the fiberglass handle, and it's just, it takes a beating.
But when you're picking a hammer, you should definitely hold it. See what feels comfortable to you?
That's the key. Because every grip's different. Because a lot of people love the feel of wood.
Right.
Just a wood handle.
Well, I was talking to my dad last night, and I asked him what kind of hammer he had, and he's like, "I've had the same hammer for 30 years."
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
And he likes the wood handle.
Yeah, and like this fiberglass one I have has just a really nice rubberish. I'm sure it's a composite, but it's like a rubber-like handle, and it feels great, just the shape of it and how thick it is, because some handles are thicker, especially for some of these framing hammers, so you can really get a nice grip and get a lot of leverage. And then kind of the ultimate, so I've got, kind of one of my prized hammers is, I have two styles.
You have a prized hammer?
Yes, it's an Estwing steel rip hammer. And this thing is one forged, the head and the handle is all forged out of one piece of steel, beautifully balanced. It's just a great looking hammer. These steel hammers should absolutely last your lifetime. You're going to stand up to any projects that you're doing, and most pros say that they prefer the steel hammers because they're better balanced.
What does that mean, balanced?
So when you're swinging...
I know what balanced means. I just don't know what you're referring to.
Well, what's funny is some people don't like a fiberglass handle with a heavy steel head because it almost feels top heavy. Whereas these full body, where the head and the handle is all made out of one piece of steel, not only is there nothing to break, there's no welds, there's nothing to break, but it really feels balanced. It doesn't feel like it's top heavy because the weight is distributed through the whole thing. Whereas you have this light fiberglass handle and a heavy head, it almost feels like it's you can lose control. So the key is just trying them and see what's comfortable in your hand.
What are some features?
So you can get a magnetic nail starter on the head.
What does that mean?
So this is a groove on the top of the hammer, and there's a magnet there that you set your nail in. Let's say we're pounding in a 2 or 2.5 inch long nail. You set your nail in there, and rather than having to hold the nail with your other hand, you can hit the wood. It'll just impale the tip of it. You pull your hammer away, it's already started, and now you can finish pounding it. So if you're working by yourself, if you're trying to hold pieces of wood together rather than having to brace it and hold the nail at the same time, which is really convenient for bigger framing projects, and also if you're pounding some wood that's just slightly out of reach, rather than having to try to reach both hands up there to start a nail, this you just load the nail in the top of the hammer and just tap it into the wood and pull your hammer away and then pound it through.
Interesting.
So it's very convenient if you're doing a lot of framing projects. And it keeps your fingers away when you're starting the nail too. Another feature I see on some hammers are these extra wide striking faces. So
what does that do?
So really nice if you're, again, doing a lot of big projects because it gives you more, if you're reaching and pounding fast, it gives you a wider face. If you're doing a lot of projects around the house, let's say you're hanging picture hooks or you're nailing trim, sometimes that wide face can make it difficult to see what you're hammering, though.
Yeah.
And it's hard in tight spaces. I would say
easier to hit your fingers too.
Yeah. So if you're doing big projects, I think it's really a nice feature. But for just the standard size face, it's about an inch. I would say that's probably the most versatile, just for basic home projects around the house.
Are there smaller faces than that?
Yeah, you can get a hammer. You can get a smaller handle and a smaller head with a smaller striking face.
So like a baby hammer?
Yes. And I always recommend that you have. So if it were me, if I were just starting my toolbox, I would have a standard claw hammer with a fiberglass handle, 16 ounces, and then I would have one of these smaller hammers, so maybe around 12 ounces with a smaller face, smaller head. And it's just really convenient for tight places and small projects. But you wouldn't want to use this if you're hammering together, let's say 2x4s or bigger projects.
Are you going to talk about any other kinds of hammers?
Well, a couple other styles that I think homeowners should have or should at least consider. One is the ball peen hammer. So this peen, P-E-E-N. Oh, I got to spell. So the head, I didn't think I'd be doing any spelling in this episode.
Really?
So the head has a face on one side that you're nailing with, and then on the other side, rather than the claw, you've got this round ball. And traditionally, this was used for bending and shaping metal. So the average homeowner is not going to use the peen side. But what's great about this is the head on these are specially hardened. So if you're using any type of metal tools like chisels or punches, it's designed to be used for that. So if you're working on projects where you're going to be using a cold chisel for cutting nuts or rivets or bolts or any metal, or if you're using masonry chisels, this would be the tool for it, because many of the standard hammers you can crack the face on it if you're using it against a hardened chisel. Yeah, so they really recommend ball peen hammers. And
I didn't think you could break a hammer.
Oh yeah, you can. Yeah, I've done it.
Well, good job. What about rubber mallets?
So these are nice to have. It allows you to pound things together without damaging the finish. So if you're doing or plan on doing cabinet work or furniture, rubber mallet is just really handy to have. It persuades wood to move without, like a regular hammer. You're just going to put indentations into the wood, where a rubber mallet's going to do a nice job for you. And then they have another style called the dead blow mallet. So this has a hollow head, which is filled with metal pellets, so it keeps the head from bouncing off the material, where a rubber mallet tends to want to bounce a little bit.
Right.
These, as you come in contact with the material, all those pellets slam into the inside of the head, and it kind of holds it in place, so it doesn't bounce around, so it's kind of cool.
So is that more fun?
Yeah, I like them, yeah. And then you can use it like a musical instrument, too.
Oh, exciting.
And then one other thing, if you're doing a bunch of projects, let's say driving stakes, or if you're breaking up masonry, or if you're going to be using cold chisels, doing a lot of demolition, a club hammer is nice. And they'll call this, so this is like a mini sledgehammer, and this is either called an engineering hammer, a drilling, or a club hammer. And they're just very convenient for projects where you need to, use some heavy weight.
What are the size of these?
So usually the handle's about 10 inches long and then 2 to 5 pounds. You want to go over some tips?
Okay.
So if you're starting large nails into lumber, you want to choke up on your grip and just tap it into the wood so it stays in place. And then you want to slide your hand down to the bottom of the handle. That's where you're going to get your best leverage. And you want a nice full swing. You don't want to just tap it. You want to use the weight of the head and the momentum you're creating with a full swing and really drive it into the wood. And a couple tips with holding the nail. I would hold the nail at the top of the nail. So if you were to slide off and hit your finger, there's going to be airspace. If you hold it at the bottom of the nail and it slides off and you crush your finger between the wood and the hammer, it's going to be a lot more painful. And then for small nails, you drive a small nail through a piece of cardboard and hold it, start it, and then tear that away.
Interesting.
And then, something I used a couple times, we always had those telescopic magnets, like a magnet on a stick.
Right.
And so I would put a nail on that, and that allowed me to hold it where I wanted it and get it started, and then just pull the magnet away. So that worked real well. For large projects, I would use a nail pouch. And, I've used a bunch of my pouches where you hold your hammer and your tape measure. Then after a while, we started using these just cheap canvas pouches to pour our nails in. And they're very convenient because you can put a lot in there and your hands go into it very easy. So that's really nice. And what it also prevents you from doing, or at least you're not as likely to put the nails in your mouth and hold them.
Which is really gross, isn't it?
Well, many of the coatings are actually toxic. Like some of the zinc coatings, you really don't want to absorb that into your system.
Whenever I use these nails, I end up getting sick.
And then always wear goggles. If you're doing a project and you're nailing, especially framing projects where you're really using force on these nails, the particles chip off and the coating can chip off. So I would always use goggles. And then if you're nailing into hard wood or near the edge of wood, I would always drill a pilot hole slightly smaller than the size of the nail. You can also just blunt the tip of the nail by tapping it with a hammer on a solid surface. So once this tip is blunt, it's actually just going to punch a hole through wood rather than splitting it, which is a great little trick. And then when you're nailing into baseboard and trim, rather than pounding all the way down and taking a chance of marring the finish, you can tap it close, and that's why I like that beveled hammer face. Then you can use a nail set. And a nail set is just this thin, tapered rod of metal, and they have a dimple at the end that grabs the top of a finishing nail so it doesn't slip out. And then you're going to pound this just under the surface. Then you can just finish it with a little wood filler so that you get a perfect look. And you want to make sure that you're matching the nail set to the size of the nail.
So they come in different sizes?
Yes. Yeah, and you get a kit usually with 3 or 4 different sizes for all the different finishing nails.
What are some top-rated companies?
So you have Stanley, Craftsman, Tekton. It's Tekton. And they've got some really nice, inexpensive models, but they're very highly rated. And then Dead On. They have a really cool skull logo. And their Pro line, these full steel hammers, they look really cool. They have all kinds of cool cutouts on them. But they've got a couple lines that are really nice for homeowners, lightweight, strong. They have a graphite handle, 16 ounce. And then another company that's rated very high by Carpenters is Estwing. It's Estwing, and these are pro hammers, but they've got 2 or 3 lines that are just very affordable. They've got a new line out. It's the Ultra Hammer very highly rated. It's one-piece forged steel, and it comes in 15 and 19 ounce, so that 15 ounce is just a perfect hammer. And this is something that would, you buy this, it's going to last you a lifetime.
Right.
And the Estwing, they've been in business since 1923. And if you ever go on to any of the Carpenter forums, the Carpenters just love these.
Well, if you see anybody with a blue handle on their hammer, it's an Estwing.
Yeah. And they've got some cool ones. Some of their handles are leather coated, leather wrapped. Yeah, very hip looking. And then there's a couple other top companies, but once you get into the companies like Stiletto, Stiletto, and a couple of the other brands, primarily designed for professionals, they're very, very expensive. And I would say, for a top quality, $20 to $40, you can get a top quality hammer. You can get them inexpensive, like those Tectons. I think I've seen them for, $12.
Right.
If you're looking for something, you plan on doing a lot of remodeling or a lot of home repair projects.
Or just you want to buy one hammer that's going to last you a lifetime.
And you're done. Yeah, I think that you can probably get away $20 to $40.
And then you can hand it out down through the generation.
Absolutely. Yeah, have it engraved.
Do you have anything else to add?
I would say if you're picking up a hammer at the store, take the time to grab it, to try it out.
Well, you should pick up a couple different ones, see how they feel.
Yeah, try 2 or 3.
Do you like the wood? Do you like fiberglass? Do you like steel handles?
Yeah, and move it around, because you have to feel like you can control the weight of it if it feels balanced.
Try and pound something?
Yeah, sneak over to the lumber area, get some wood. For most homeowners, you're looking right around 16 ounces. A face, I would probably get a face, like a standard face, about 1 inch. To this, I would add a small hammer, so like a 12-ounce hammer.
So the baby hammer?
Right, and that's going to be great for little tacking around the house and projects where you're putting in picture hangers. And then you can add other hammers as you have home projects for them, so like ball peen, rubber, or a club hammer.
Let's wrap this up.
You can check out our book on Amazon.com. It's called Home Improvement Solutions, What Every Homeowner Should Know.
Book 1.
And if you've gotten one of the downloads and you like it, please leave us a review on Amazon.
5 stars.
If you'd like to subscribe to our podcast, you can subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or Jabbercast.
If you enjoyed it, please leave us a review.
You can check out our home improvement videos on our YouTube channel, Fix It Home Improvement.
You can subscribe to that as well.
If you'd like to email us, you can email us at fixitpodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you for listening.
Talk to you next week.